Tonight on Ukraine Today, explosions in Russia. Ukrainian drones attacked the Black Sea Fleet naval base and a petrochemical plant on Russian territory. A crime, live on air. In the Donetsk region, Russian troops shot a civilian family and took a teenage girl hostage. Unprecedented Trump's support. According to the US president, Ukraine has the chance to restore all of its territory in its original form. Kremlin's verbal reaction. What did Putin's spokesman say about Trump's position on Russia's war? All that and more, right now. Hello, my name is Volodymyr Robchun. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and let's move on to the news. We start with the explosions in Russia. Today, Ukrainian UAVs and naval drones attacked the Black Sea Fleet's naval base in Novorossiysk. Details are still coming in. Ukrainian drones also struck again, for the second time in just a few days, the Gazprom Neftekhim petrochemical plant in Bashkortostan. This is one of Russia's largest oil refining and petrochemical plants. It supplies products to the Russian army, which makes it a fully legitimate target. It was loud also in temporarily occupied Crimea. Ukrainian strikes there are destroying Russian missile systems and unique radar stations. Military headquarters and illegally built country houses of the Kremlin elite are burning. More details next.
The Russians are clearly having problems in Crimea, and the further it goes, the more surprises await the enemy.
Crimea is gradually, if we draw an analogy, thanks to the Ukrainian Defense Forces, turning into a sort of Krimobaevka, by analogy with Kornobaevka, where the Russian army, Russian occupiers, and accordingly their weapons and equipment are constantly being destroyed.
Ukrainian defenders have a clear understanding of where the Russian occupiers are located in occupied Crimea and are doing everything possible to drive them out.
There is active work being done in Crimea. The process of demilitarizing Crimea is ongoing. This is an integral part of the deoccupation process.
In temporarily occupied Crimea, there are increasing problems with fuel, water, and military equipment. Ukrainian strikes are destroying enemy bases, while the Russians are trying to conceal the scale of their losses. We are talking about ground, air, and naval operations that our defenders are successfully carrying out.
Today, the Russian military facilities in Crimea that came under attack, let me emphasize military facilities, are those that pose a threat not only to the peninsula itself, because they are located there, but also in fact threaten other regions of our country. This particular equipment is currently being actively used to launch devastating missile strikes on our sovereign territory, and accordingly it is precisely what enables the Russians to conduct extensive and thorough reconnaissance of our precious airspace.
Enemy air defense facilities are being regularly eliminated, naval targets are being destroyed, and ground targets are being struck, including railways.
The air defense systems in Crimea are currently very active and are trying to repel strikes by Ukrainian defense forces, but they are not succeeding very well. They are also being used as weapons of killing.
Problems with supplies are growing on the peninsula, and the Russians' defensive positions are collapsing.
Work is also underway on those key points that will open the door to Crimea for us, in particular the Kinburn Spit, the Dendrovskaya Spit, and of course the territory of Crimea itself.
Almost every week, the destruction of Russian helicopters or air defense elements is recorded. This creates an atmosphere of fear among the occupiers and forces them to conserve resources. Ukrainian drones have even reached the government dachas. On the night of September 22nd, explosions were heard in the Foros area. Russian collaborators reported that drones struck the territory of the Foros sanatorium. It was reported that 3 people were killed and 16 were injured.
It is quite likely that this very guest house was the meeting place for, well, high-ranking officials, possibly from the FSB or quite possibly the armed forces of the Russian Federation. But we never saw any objective monitoring, so-called from the Russian side, regarding the dead or wounded civilians. And that's the first thing the Russian Federation would have done if that had actually been the case.
The Russians kept silent about the fact that there were very important guests at the sanatorium at the time of the attack. Exactly who they were is not specified. A notice was posted on the sanatorium's social media page stating that on September 21st, the Foros Hall restaurant would be closed for special service. All the news is showing the school, which is located nearby.
The school's assembly hall suffered the most damage. Here, part of the ceiling has collapsed. Just look at what's left of one of the walls. From the damage, it's clear that the drone flew in through this window. Right now, there are fragments scattered everywhere here.
The Russians tried to use this school for propaganda purposes, in a school that was closed on the weekend, no students, nothing, to cover up yet another of their terrorist attacks on our country. This is what the Russians always do. But again, it's not actually about the school being hit, it's about the boarding house with the same name, Terletsky, which is located across from the school.
Nearby is also the government dacha number 11, the Zarya facility. There's a helicopter pad here, so FSO officers are always present and can be brought in to secure meetings.
We are demonstrating that today our defense forces, using various means of firepower, can reach the occupiers anywhere in our Crimea, anywhere, north, south, west or east. And today there is not a single facility in Crimea that cannot be struck by our defense forces. Once again, the Russian air and missile defense has proven its incompetence. They are incapable of protecting either Russia or the temporarily occupied territories. The air and missile defense system in Crimea is being destroyed, and this is the path to the demilitarization of Crimea and, most importantly, its deoccupation. We are on the right track.
The Russian aircraft fleet on the occupied peninsula has been reduced as a result of the successful combat operation by the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Special Unit, Ghosts. 3 enemy Mi-8 multipurpose helicopters were hit, as well as the expensive Russian radar station Nebo-U.
4 helicopters have been destroyed in just a few days, along with 2 unique B-12 Chaika amphibious aircraft. There are actually very few of them in the Black Sea Fleet. If I'm not mistaken, only 6. 2 of them have already been destroyed.
The intelligence officers meticulously showed compelling footage of the entire operation and a detailed video of the extensive wreckage of one of the destroyed helicopters. Occupied Crimea has become a symbol of the fuel collapse. A large amount of fuel was brought here to refuel Russian military equipment. As a result, there is now a shortage and record high fuel prices on the peninsula. The rise in gasoline prices is linked to Ukraine's strikes on Russian oil refineries. The video shows Sevastopol. In Yalta, gasoline was delivered to one of the gas stations. The line of people wanting to refuel is simply enormous. Neither the Russian authorities nor the occupation authorities in Crimea acknowledge the problem. They insist that it's merely a matter of logistics. Human rights violations in Crimea are regularly documented and reported to the UN Human Rights Council and the OSCE. The Russian occupation administration is forcibly conscripting Crimeans into the ranks of the Russian Armed Forces. Refusal to serve is punishable by criminal prosecution. In addition, there is ongoing militarization of children. Crimea is currently waiting to return to its rightful place, and Ukraine is absolutely not allowing Russia to normalize the ongoing illegal occupation of its territory.
Footage has surfaced online showing the aftermath of Ukrainian drone strikes on a Russian training ground in the Krasnodar region. These were the August events. Judging by the photos, a lot of enemy equipment was destroyed and damaged, including service vehicle for Iskander missiles launchers. In the past 24 hours, Russia lost at least 970 troops killed and wounded. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, that's already 1,104,550 invaders. In addition, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 2 Russian tanks, 3 armored vehicles, 43 artillery systems, and dozens of other enemy assets. I doubt the Kremlin worries much about losses on the battlefield. Even more so, Russia's autumn draft begins soon, in October 1st to be precise. What are Putin's plans for it? Who will be thrown straight into the meat grinder of war? Answers in our report.
Citizens of Russia, get ready! The autumn draft starts on October 1st, and what's interesting is that it comes with new rules.
We'll do as the state regulator decides.
The autumn draft will last until December 31st, 2025 throughout all of Russia.
It should be explicitly said that the screws for the draft campaign have been steadily tightening for quite some considerable time now. They've passed a whole bunch of new and restrictive laws that make life as difficult as humanly possible for conscripts, making their situation increasingly challenging.
But what's interesting is that now, just like 2 years ago, the deputy head of the main organizational and mobilization directorate stated that this draft has nothing to do with the special military operation.
As before, it will be carried out within the time frames established by the legislation of the Russian Federation and according to the planned schedule.
The length of service also remains the same, 12 months, and the deployment of conscripts to their places of service will begin on October 15th. But is it really true that not a single conscript will be assigned tasks on the territory of Ukraine?
Of course, this is connected to the fact that the war is ongoing because they're running out of people at the front. No matter what anyone says, as soon as someone joins the army, today he's a conscript and tomorrow he's already a contract soldier. Because there are plenty of ways to force someone to sign a contract. Those called up for service are often quite young and don't understand what they might be signed up for. First and foremost, there are plenty of opportunities for physical pressure, moral pressure, and all sorts of other pressures in the army.
Now say hello to electronic draft notices, which will be sent to your personal account on the government services portal. But deleting the app isn't a solution because if you don't show up at the draft office, you'll face a bunch of restrictions. For example, you could be banned from leaving Russia, making property transactions, getting loans, driving a car, or even receiving payments.
Yes, of course, this is connected to the war because if it weren't for the war, there would be no need to introduce all this nonsense since up until now, conscription was happening without any of this and they managed just fine. And in fact, there was no need to introduce electronic draft notices or imprison conscientious objectors. But now suddenly all of this has become necessary. Why? Exactly. Because there aren't enough people at the front and they need to supply more people for the war. And what's the easiest way? That's right, by force.
Now, commissions and medical examinations can also be conducted throughout the year, although conscription into the army still only happens in the spring and fall. The authorities claim this is just for the convenience of the military enlistment offices and once again has nothing to do with the special military operation. But that's not all the new changes.
Accordingly, they've extended the validity period of the draft board's decisions. Previously, each decision of the draft board applied only to the current draft period. But now, if the draft board already made a decision about you last time, they can easily, based on that decision, you can be drafted right now.
Nevertheless, after 12 months of service, Russia promises to send everyone home.
In conclusion, I want to reassure conscripted servicemen and their parents and remind you that all conscripted servicemen who have completed their required term of military service will be discharged on time and sent to their places of residence.
But do they actually send them back?
They force you to sign contracts at the very beginning. As soon as you arrive, you take the oath and that's it. Goodbye. After that, they threaten you, saying they'll either rape you or kill you if you don't sign the contract. Of course, no one comes back after a year because if they manage to drag you into service, your own government sure as hell won't let you out of there alive.
In any case, during the last autumn draft, men were detained in the metro, in public places, at work or at home, and then were quickly sent off to the army, according to Verstka.
The likelihood of this happening again is almost 100%. And by the way, there's something new now. If a person evades the draft, they can be stripped of their acquired citizenship. But that's just the cherry on top.
This spring, according to Zemlyansky, 160,000 people were drafted. And what's most interesting is that these campaigns were carried out most efficiently not in Russia's big cities, but in Buryatia, Karelia, the annexed Crimea, the self-proclaimed DPR and LPR, as well as in several other regions.
In major cities with populations over 1 million, if they start drafting everyone, it could lead to protest actions even now. Because frankly, a mass attempt to force people into the army would provoke a backlash in these very cities. That's why they try to keep up appearances there. By the way, people are also being detained near the metro, but since a significant number of migrants still work there, they meet their quotas at the expense of migrants, and as a result, the local population is not too heavily affected.
When the authorities say that the draft has nothing to do with the war and that everyone will return home, in reality, these are just words meant to reassure people. The state lulls people into a false sense of security to prevent panic, while at the same time deceiving its own people by sending them to fight in a war it itself started against Ukraine.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The occupiers launched massive strike on Kharkiv last night. Numerous hits from enemy drones were recorded. Because of Russian attacks, part of the city were left in darkness. In the Donetsk region, Russian troops shot a civilian family and took a teenage girl hostage. This was reported by members of the 3rd Army Corps. The enemy is using the child as cover for its groups advancing toward the Liman direction. This war crime was caught on video by Ukrainian reconnaissance drone. According to Ukrainian troops, radio intercepts confirm the actions were pre-planned. Putin plans to seize Odesa region through Moldova. This warning came from Moldovan President Maya Sandu. She also addressed her people with a message about the direct threat to Moldova's sovereignty and independence. All details in the report.
Everything will be decided this coming weekend. By disrupting the elections, Russia is trying to seize power in Moldova and overthrow the government, after which the country could be used as a staging ground for an attack on Ukraine. President Maya Sandu addressed the nation with this video message.
If Russia gains control over Moldova, the consequences will be immediate. And they threaten not only our country, but the entire region. Freedom of movement could come to an end, and our land could become a springboard for incursion into the Odesa region. The Transnistrian region will be destabilized.
At the same time, experts believe that it is precisely Transnistria that poses a particular danger today.
Let me remind you, Moldova shares 1,222 kilometers of border with Ukraine. Moldova is a small country, but important infrastructure projects, so to speak, connect us with Ukraine, which is why the stakes are high.
There, traditionally, the population has the most pro-Russian sentiments, and it is clear that the Moldovan authorities have not done enough work with them over all these years.
Politicians have called on Maya Sandu to take control of Transnistria. This pro-Russian enclave is now a huge problem not only for her country, but for the entire European continent. Of course, it is not solely her responsibility, but the leading role in this matter really does belong to her. If she had initiated the appropriate processes and changed the agenda regarding Transnistria, she would be facing significantly fewer threats today.
They decided to start fighting back only at the final stage. So less than a week before the parliamentary elections themselves, Moldova began identifying and detaining possible participants in the unrest that the Kremlin is already preparing for election day.
This is connected to the planned forceful protests after the elections. The criminal world still remains part of this overall post-Soviet system of thieves in law. And that's why, with the help of these people and these organizations, forceful protests were being prepared both inside the prisons and on the outside. Just this morning, the police, together with the special services and the Information and Security Service, carried out an operation to prevent these actions.
So, during searches on September 22nd in Moldova, 74 people were detained who are suspected of undergoing training in Serbia to organize rallies and protests. In particular, they were trained abroad in handling firearms and special equipment. For this, the participants received about 400 euros. Law enforcement officials claim that Russian special services are behind the operation, and the suspects are connected both to Moldovan political parties and to criminal groups. At the same time, the investigation itself has been ongoing since July of this year. But the use of force is only part of the Kremlin's tactics. After practicing in Romania, they also decided to use mass interference in elections through social networks in Moldova.
In other words, a deliberately massive number of short videos are being produced for TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook, all distributed in both Romanian and Russian, but with Moldovan themes, specifically to attract the attention of our citizens. And this is what they are betting on.
For those who are older and haven't mastered TikTok yet, there's a separate program. That very Russian Orthodox Church, which has assimilated in Moldova, still pursues the same religious goals: complete subordination to Moscow.
One of these concrete pillars of their identity, so to speak, is the Orthodox connection with Russia, because they are a Turkic people, yes, Orthodox, who were supposedly relocated here by the Russian Federation at some point in history. And so they still express their gratitude in this way, through their love for Russia. And so Orthodoxy itself, specifically Orthodoxy in the Russian style, serves as a point of connection and communication with Russia for them. And of course, Russia strategically uses this situation to significantly strengthen its political influence, as well as to substantially increase its economic and separatist influence over these particular regions, thereby extending its reach and control.
At the same time, analysts point out that Moldova's political system is organized in such a way that the parliament has significantly broader powers, including with regard to the country's foreign policy direction. That is why parliamentary elections are almost more important than the election of the country's leader.
It seems to me that unfortunately there is a lack of this understanding. If we talk about society as a whole in percentage terms, there is a lack of understanding of the degree of threat, because people think, well, how many times has this already happened, for heaven's sake? We had the pro-Russian Voronin in power, then he was replaced, then there was the pro-Russian Dodon, and again he was replaced. But all of that was before the illness of that very northern dictator reached such an extreme stage when he started attacking neighboring countries and sending drones over the European Union. And I think that if this time we end up in his clutches again, it won't be as easy to get out as it was in the past.
Experts also believe that this week will remain tense right up until the elections, which will take place this weekend. At the same time, the authorities are urging people to stay alert around the clock, since this is essentially Russia's last chance to steer Moldova away from European integration by relatively peaceful means.
The Kremlin lost the first phase of the hybrid war in the fall of 2024, when it tried to disrupt the referendum and the re-election of Maya Sandu. And now, a fierce and intense battle, a profound and significant struggle, is currently unfolding with great urgency for complete and decisive control over the legislative body, the parliament.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And now is the good moment to subscribe to the channel and like this video. I will also ask you to share it, so as many people as possible can see it. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. That's what US President Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social. He added that Russia has been fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years in a war that a real military power could have won in less than a week. This, according to the US president, does not show Russia's strength. It actually makes it look like a paper tiger. This post appeared right after Trump met with Zelensky. Later, President Zelensky gave an interview for Fox News. Here's what he said about the meeting with Donald Trump.
I'm sure in my people, in my army, and I'm sure in strengthening of in support of the United States. But President Trump was more positive in it, and he showed that he wants to support Ukraine to the very end. So we understand now that we are ready to finish this war as quick as possible. And he wants, and I want, and our people want. But he understands that Putin doesn't want, and he understands that he is not winning, but he says to everybody that he will win. And I see very, it was a little bit surprise for me, you're right, I was very positive signals from the side that Trump and America will be with us to the end of the war. Yes, as we will see, right? We will see, but God bless, it will be so.
And here's the Kremlin verbal reaction. Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that Russia is not a tiger, but a bear, and that paper bears don't exist. First of all, Peskov lied. Again. Here's an example. Origami, a paper bear. Second, I think Peskov's words should be read in the tone of an offended dictator's minion. Russia is not a tiger, but a bear, and the paper bears don't exist. Earlier, Putin's spokesman said that what's happening around Russia is a war and Russia must win it. According to Peskov, Putin is ready to meet with Zelensky, but without preparation, such a meeting would be a failed PR stunt. He also claimed that those who refuse negotiations today, tomorrow, or the day after will have much worse positions. But why does he keep repeating the same things? He could just record a few phrases and Russian propaganda would play them in random order. And who is Peskov trying to fool? It's obvious. The war is not around Russia, but Russia launched it. Putin is afraid to meet with Zelensky. Kremlin's invasion plans collapsed. Most likely, Dmitry just needs to say something all the time, and the fact that he's spouting nonsense, well, that's just details. Finally, about what's happening in the so-called State of Palestine, recently recognized by several Western countries. Militants from the terrorist group Hamas, which is the official authority in Gaza, executed men suspected of cooperation with Israel. Once again, not proven cooperation, just suspicion. This, so you know, is a regular practice. Hamas cripples and kills even those Palestinians who simply accept food from Israel in order to survive. So the political system of the State of Palestine is pure terrorist totalitarianism, and Canada, Australia, the UK, Portugal and France are ready to recognize it. But not the independence of democratic Taiwan. Interesting, huh? That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share. See you next time.